golden light under the canvas, and the dust and smells of the old circus are gone. But the acts are still pretty much the same. Oh, sure, there have been some changes. But the circus is still the greatest show on earth. And to have a circus, you have to have clowns.
I take the threat very seriously. I take the fact that he develops weapons of mass destruction very seriously. I remember the fact that he has invaded 2 countries before. I know for a fact that he's poisoned his own people. He doesn't believe in the worth of each individual. He doesn't believe in public dissent. I look forward to a dialogue. We must anticipate problems before that come. I will remind them that history has called us into action, that we love freedom, that we'll be deliberate, patient, and strong in the values that we adhere to. But we can't let the world's worst leaders blackmail, threaten, hold freedom-loving nations hostage with the world's worst weapons.
Yes. I think you can make the case, hypothetically, very theoretically, you can make the case that there are occasions that might require preemptive action. That's why I say, give us the facts, give us a far better appreciation of the circumstances involving Iraq, and that may be one of them. But that case has not been made so far.
Do you have a sense yet of what the Senate is leaning toward the House, the unrestricted approach or the administration's narrower?
All of this was brought upon us in a single day, and night fell on a different world, a world where freedom itself is under attack. Americans have many questions tonight. Americans are asking, who attacked our country? The evidence we have gathered all points to a collection of loosely affiliated terrorist organizations known as Al-Qaeda. They are some of the murderers indicted for bombing American embassies in Tanzania and Kenya and responsible for bombing the USS Cole. This group and its leader, a person named Osama bin Laden, are linked to many other organizations in different countries, including the Egyptian Islamic Jihad and the Islamic movement of Uzbekistan. There are thousands of these terrorists in more than 60 countries. They are recruited from their own nations and neighborhoods and brought to camps in places like Afghanistan, where they are trained in the tactics of terror. They are sent back to their homes or sent to hide in countries around the world to plot evil and destruction. The leadership of Al-Qaeda has great influence in Afghanistan and supports the Taliban regime in controlling most of that country. In Afghanistan, we see Al-Qaeda's vision for the world. It is not only repressing its own people, it is threatening people everywhere by sponsoring and sheltering and supplying terrorists. By aiding and abetting murder, the Taliban regime is committing murder. And tonight, the United States of America makes the following demands on the Taliban. Deliver to United States authorities all the leaders of Al-Qaeda who hide in your land. Our nation, this generation, will lift a dark thread of violence from our people and our future. We will rally the world to this cause by our efforts, by our courage. We will not tire, we will not falter, and we will not fail.
To be fair, we had helped to create the problem we're now fighting.
How?
Because when the Soviet Union invaded Afghanistan, we had this brilliant idea that we were going to come to Pakistan and create a force of mujahideen, equip them with Stinger missiles and everything else to go after the Soviets inside Afghanistan. And we were successful. The Soviets left Afghanistan, and then we said, great, goodbye, leaving these trained people who were fanatical in Afghanistan and Pakistan, leaving them well armed, creating a mess, frankly, that at the time we didn't really recognize. We were just so happy to see the Soviet Union fall, and we thought, okay, fine, we're okay now. Everything's going to be so much better. Now you look back, the people we're fighting today, we were supporting in the fight against the Soviets.
Well, if there was some sort of sense of a win for us, in the sense that, you know, we see all these casualties, we see the casualties going up in Afghanistan. If we got Bin Laden, Osama bin Laden, you know, that would, I think, inspire the American people to feel much more committed to this project. Do you believe that the Pakistani government knows where Osama bin Laden is?
I think elements in the government do. I've said that before. But I think it's also important for your viewers to know we have been getting, with Pakistani cooperation, a lot of the top leadership of al-Qaeda. Now, we haven't gotten bin Laden or Zawahiri, but we have consistently been able to track and kill a lot of their principal leadership. So there is a story to be told here. It's not yet what I want it to be, because as having been a senator from New York on 9/11, I want those guys. I mean, I will not be satisfied until we get them. But we have made a lot of progress, and we've created a much closer cooperative relationship between the United States and Pakistan in going after what are now common enemies.
And now for something completely different.
Now, here's how it works. Really easy. Divide and conquer can only work if the people that are divided are not aware of the falsely created division. If you're not aware of it, then it works. If you know about it, then it don't work no more. If you have socialism without capitalism, it becomes communism. If you have capitalism without socialism, it becomes fascism. And it's just that easy. That's all you need to know. That's why Masonic symbols are all over your freaking money. But you don't pay any attention.
And now for something completely different.
Who are Gog and Magog? Are they funny-looking people, or are they normal human beings? Huh? To answer that question, we have to locate a people who prior to Waylul lil Arab, prior to the time of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, had no special links with the Holy Land. But after the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ are now obsessed with liberating the Holy Land. Only one people qualify. It's Europe. Europe, after the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ embarks upon the Crusades. It's the white people doing it, the European. It's not an essentially Christian phenomenon. Why? Because no other Christians are involved in the Crusades, only Europe. So the Crusades are an essentially European phenomenon masquerading as Christianity. Secondly, the obsession with the Holy Land continues with the Zionist movement.
Christine?
But the Zionist movement is European. But it is masquerading as Jewish. How do we know that? No other Jews are involved in the effort to liberate the Holy Land, only the European. And then finally we have the island of Britain, which is now secular and godless. But this Britain now issues the famous Balfour Declaration in 1917 that it is the intention of the British government to work for the establishment of a Jewish national home in the Holy Land. This is strange. I think I told you the only thing stranger than this ever happened in history was when the cow jumped over the moon. Huh? This strange obsession on the part of Europe for liberating the Holy Land, which they eventually did in 1919, indicates that Gog and Magog are located in European civilization. We can refine it even more than that. We can be specific within European civilization. Because the hadith is that when Gog and Magog are released, the first of them will pass by the Sea of Galilee and start to drink the water. And by the time the last of them pass, they'll say there used to be water here. Who are they who are drinking the water from the Sea of Galilee? Not the Egyptians, not the Jordanians, not the Syrians. Who? Israel. Who in Israel? Not Banu Israel, the European. It is the European Jew who controls the state of Israel. And it is he who has established the modern economy, which is drinking the water, the industrial economy. That's where the water is going. And it is he, as the government of Israel, who has established the policy of making the deserts green. You need a lot of water to do that. So we can identify Gog and Magog not only in Europe, but also in that part of Europe which is Jewish.
St Dunstan in the west on Fleet Street. And these three characters here, these are 14th century statues, and I think they are of King Lud in the middle and his two sons. King Lud, according to myth, being the founder of London. Also commemorated in Ludgate Hill, which is nearby here, on the other side of the Fleet. And this church, for some reason, seems to really kind of attract myth, because we have the statues here of King Lud representing one of the founding myths of London, and then outside are the statues of Gog and Magog. So these two incredibly camp statues, quite why they feel the need to stand there with their hand on one hip in order to dong that bell, I don't know. Well, they are the giants Gog and Magog, who, according to legend, were slaughtered by Brutus the Trojan. Also, allegedly, another person who's credited with founding London, in around the year 1100 BC.
I've been seeing the dark entity that haunts your house and your land. I saw it first when I came through your door. It was latched to your back. And it doesn't matter where you go, this dark entity has latched itself to your family
a dumb joke.
Please proceed down the stairs to the main floor.
Presence is choosing to emerge at this moment. It looks as if the person, the little you, were choosing. But it's a helpful way of putting it. It's a perspective on it to say you can choose to be present, but when you think you choose to be present, at that moment presence is emerging. It looks as if you were choosing. I'm choosing it to be present.
To Chirac, quote, Jacques, you and I share a common faith. You're Roman Catholic, I'm Methodist, but we are both Christians committed to the teachings of the Bible. We share one common Lord. Bush goes on to say, quote, Gog and Magog are at work in the Middle East. Biblical prophecies are being fulfilled. This confrontation is willed by God, who wants to use this conflict to erase his people's enemies before a new age begins. End quote.
Gog and Magog are from two books of the Bible, one the book of Ezekiel and one the book of Revelation, and it is central elements in the apocalyptic the Armageddon concept. And so Chirac's response when he reads this is, I'm dealing with a fanatic, and I'm not going to make national security decisions for France based on someone, the president's interpretation of the Bible.
You are absolutely right that John McCain has not talked about my Muslim faith, and you're absolutely right that that has not come my Christian faith.
And now for something completely different.
Really easy. Divide and conquer can only work if the people that are divided are not aware of the falsely created division. If you're not aware of it, then it works. If you know about it, then it don't work no more. If you have socialism without capitalism, it becomes communism. If you have capitalism without socialism, it becomes fascism. And it's just that easy. I love you. That's all you need to know. That's why Masonic symbols are all over your freaking money. But you don't pay any attention.
Mr. Speaker, I've never put the justification for action as regime change. We have to act within the terms set out in Resolution 1441. That is our legal base. But it is the reason why I say frankly that if we do act, we should do so with a clear conscience and a strong heart. I accept fully that those opposed to this course of action share my detestation of Saddam. Who could not? Iraq is a potentially wealthy country that in 1979, the year before Saddam came to power, was richer than Portugal or Malaysia. Today it is impoverished, 60% of its population dependent on food aid, thousands of children dying needlessly every year from lack of food and medicine, 4 million people out of a population of just over 20 million living in exile. The brutality of the repression, the death and torture camps, the barbaric prisons for political opponents, the routine beatings for anyone or their families suspected of disloyalty. All of that is well documented. Just last week, someone slandering Saddam, tied to a post in a street in Baghdad, their tongue cut out, mutilated, and left to bleed to death as a warning to others. I recall a few weeks ago talking to an Iraqi exile and saying to her that I understood how grim it must be under the lash of Saddam. But you don't, she replied. You cannot. You do not know what it is to live in perpetual fear. And she is right. We take our freedom for granted. But imagine not to be able to speak or discuss or debate or even question the society you live in. To see friends and family taken away and never daring to complain. To suffer the humility of failing courage in the face of pitiless terror. That is how the Iraqi people live. Leave Saddam in place, and the blunt truth is that is how they will continue to be forced to live. We must face the consequences of the actions we advocate. For those of us who support the course I'm advocating, that means all the dangers of war. But for others opposed to this course, it means, let us be clear, that the Iraqi people, whose only true hope lies in the removal of Saddam, for them, the darkness will simply close back over. They will be left under his rule without any possibility of liberation. Not from us, not from anyone. Just in a moment. And if this House now demands, and this is the choice before us, if this House now demands that at this moment, faced with this threat from this regime, that British troops are pulled back, that we turn away at the point of reckoning, and this is what it means, what then? What will Saddam feel? Strengthened beyond measure. What will the other states who tyrannize their people, the terrorists who threaten our existence, what will they take from that? That the will confronting them is decaying and feeble. Who will celebrate and who will weep if we take our troops back from the Gulf now? And if our plea is for America to work with others, to be as good as well as powerful allies, will our retreat... Sorry. If our plea is for America to work with others, to be good as well as powerful allies, will our retreat make them multilateralists? Or will it rather not be the biggest impulse to unilateralism that we could possibly imagine? And what of the United Nations then, and the future of Iraq, and the Middle East peace process, devoid of our influence, stripped of our insistence? The House wanted this discussion before conflict. That was a legitimate demand. It has it. And these are the choices. And in this dilemma, no choice is perfect. No choice is ideal. But on this decision hangs the fate of many things. Of whether we summon the strength to recognize the global challenge of the 21st century and meet it. Of the Iraqi people groaning under years of dictatorship. Of our armed forces, brave men and women of whom we can feel proud, whose morale is high and whose purpose is clear. Of the institutions and alliances that will shape our world for years to come. To retreat now, I believe, would put at hazard all that we hold dearest. Turn the United Nations back into a talking shop, stifle the first steps of progress in the Middle East, leave the Iraqi people to the mercy of events on which we would have relinquished all power to influence for the better. Tell our allies that at the very moment of action, at the very moment when they need our determination, that Britain faltered. I will not be party to such a course. This is not the time to falter. This is the time for this House, not just this government or indeed this Prime Minister, but for this House to give a lead. To show that we will stand up for what we know to be right. To show that we will confront the tyrannies and dictatorships and terrorists who put our way of life at risk. To show at the moment of decision that we have the courage to do the right thing. I beg to move the motion.
I wonder if you would recommend locking down schools if you had to do it all over again.
You're okay. You're not going to get COVID if you have these vaccinations.
First of all, I didn't recommend locking anything down.
Vaccinated people do not get sick.
I recommended to the president that we shut the country down.
Night comes human level plane, missing curve, space escape, Boston bombing falls, flag Joe Biden torpedo. Dr. Fauci always lies, Stevie Wonder is a blind, fake the real, we shall see it down the rabbit hole. Bilderberg's fake bomb, Mike Obama, huge dumb bar, up the Kenyan guy, has your wife identified. Warp speed, vaccine, J&J, ultra genes, my dope. Kiss your sweet ass goodbye. Why do you trust these liars? You must be discerning, cause the world's not turning. No more astronauts or wires. This world is making you know, we know it's time we expose it. Health Department, NSA, CDC and TSA, IRS, CIA, and NASA is a crock. SpaceX, Space Force, space is clearly fake, of course. Devon Island is Mars, Elon Musk is launching cars. Einstein was a queen, 2 more weeks of quarantine. Jussie Smollett, fake attack. George Floyd, swallowed crack. Said he couldn't breathe at all, overdosed on fentanyl. AOC and Alex Knight, my big booty is so far. Why do you trust these liars? You must be discerning, cause the world's not turning. No more astronauts or wires. Bring us sick of these clowns, let's get the circus shut down. Bin Laden in the sea, Robbie Parker smiling. Epstein didn't die, flight logs are classified. California communist, you certain tops the list. Mask your kids, stay inside, for your health formaldehyde. World economic thugs, Klaus Schwab, Castro, his son Justin Trudeau. Psychos, the elite, Bill Gates are tracking me. Biotech, Moderna, Pfizer, AstraZeneca. Why do you trust these liars? You must be discerning, cause the world's not turning. No more astronauts or wires. This world is making you know it, now it's time we expose it. 9/11, no planes, another dream, another day. Building 7 falling from the plane they're calling. Nanothermite concrete, possible found in the street. Lucky Larry Silverstein, wounded like a slot machine. Shanksville, Red Pill, Rumsfeld, this South, that's what hit the Pentagon. Where is all the footage gone? Why do you trust these liars? You must be discerning, cause the world's not turning. No more astronauts or wires. We are sick of these clowns, let's get the circus shut down. Climate change, MSN, selling fear on CNN. Moonshine, spacewalk, Alfred Dalton. All the astronauts who died have a twin still alive. Challenger, master plan, Buzz Aldrin is drunk again. We have moon rocks, petrified. That sucks. Yeah, they lie. The rockets fly. CGI. Planets don't. CGI. The ISS. RBS. It's Earth flat. Actually, yes. Not dinosaurs. Yes, of course. I can't take it anymore. Why would you trust these liars? It may be concerning, NASA building is burning. Maybe carbon caught these liars. They deserve a take down for saying we go around, 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 around. Why do we trust these liars? We must be discerning, cause the world's not turning. No more astronauts or wires. This world is making you know, now it's time we expose it. Why do you trust these liars? You must be discerning, cause the world's not turning. No more astronauts or wires. This world is making you know, now it's time we expose it.
I barely found lunch.
Can you put this information today? I don't know, we'll have to wait and see. All right, take it easy. Did you get my message? No, why don't you put Dr. King in the case? Let's see. Here we go. Dr. K statement until 5 o'clock. With that...
At this point, we have found substantial evidence of an intent of senior-level Iraqi officials, including Saddam, to continue production at some future point in time of weapons of mass destruction. We have not found yet, and I'm sure you know this, otherwise you would know it earlier, we have not found at this point actual weapons. It does not mean we've concluded there are no actual weapons. It means at this point in time, and it's a huge country with a lot to do, that we have not yet found weapons. We have found a large body of continuing activities and equipment that were not declared to the UN inspectors when they returned in November of last year. This includes substantial equipment and activities in the chemical and biological area, a much more substantial activity in the missile area. The Iraqis were engaged in a very full-scale program that would have extended their delivery systems out beyond 1,000 kilometers. That is enough to reach Ankara, Cairo, Abu Dhabi, Riyadh. and these were both ballistic missiles and land attack cruise missiles, a refit of the Chinese Silkworm. The report lays out for the committee and for others considerable detail about what this is. My guess is, and everyone asked this question, the evidence we found in the nuclear program at most right now would suggest a very tentatively a restart on the program at the very most rudimentary level. It is the program right now that we probably know the least about.
If you're going to go to war and you're going to take the American nation to war and thus endanger lives of citizens, American and others all over the world because of something called the war on terrorism, then you need to be fairly certain about certain dangers. And either the chemical weapons had to be there, the nuclear weapons had to be there, or the biological weapons had to be there, and it appears to me that none of them were there.
That said, I'm not pleased by what I heard today, but we should be willing to adopt a wait-and-see attitude. That's the only alternative we really have. There's much more work to be done. My hope is that we will have a more definitive kind of conclusion in the next few months.
By what I heard, what exactly?
Well, I think every American, I think everybody involved in this effort, I think everybody in the military, certainly in the intelligence community, and certainly the members of the Iraq Survey Group would have hoped by now there would have been a breakthrough. There has not been a breakthrough.
And yet there are many examples of administration officials making unequivocal statements.
Did you ever imagine that now we'd have President Donald Trump and we might be on the verge of Prime Minister Jeremy Corbyn?
Well, everything's changing because there is an anger and discontent, and it's about the pace and the scale and the speed of change. And people feel insecure, and they're looking for someone to express their anger, their discontent, to articulate their grievances. So in America, they turn to Donald Trump. In France, they turn to someone completely different, Emmanuel Macron. In Britain, it's unclear what's going to happen, but clearly there's a lot of dissent. And the centre ground has actually folded. It's weak, and it's not able to answer the questions. And so people need to know, is my job going to be secure? What's the next job? How my kids are going to do? And people have got to answer these questions. And sometimes you feel when you read the newspapers, people are not even bothering to consider these important questions.
Is Jeremy Corbyn the right person to answer those questions?
Jeremy is a phenomenon. I keep saying, I mean...
Did you get him wrong, like so many people?
Obviously, I didn't expect him either to be leader of the Labour Party or to do so well in the election. I took us out of Iraq. You know, I became Prime Minister in 2007. We were out of Iraq by April 2009. And I told George Bush we were not going to put more troops in. We were coming out. I thought we'd become the occupiers and not the liberators. And we were out 3 years before the Americans. But I've had to look at that decision again.
Because you voted for the Iraq
Yes,
war,
of course.
Right? I mean, and in the book, you make it clear that you
I
thought
think we made a mistake.
Will you make it clear you don't think you got enough information?
No,
the Americans withheld information.
I think the Americans knew that he didn't have these weapons. Certainly in the Pentagon, they knew, and they didn't tell us. And, you know, Chilcot did a great inquiry, but he wasn't able to look at the American evidence because the Americans didn't really cooperate with his inquiry. And now when I look at the American evidence, they didn't worry that he didn't have weapons. They were going to go for him anyway.
They were into regime change.
They wanted the regime to change and Saddam out. We had to have a justification if we were ever going to take action, and they had information that I believe they didn't communicate.
Do you feel conned?
I feel misled. I think that's the best word. We were not just misinformed, we were misled by the Pentagon. And I feel the basis of our decision. You see, I talked to the MI6 at the time, and I'm be honest about it. They said, look, they almost knew the address and the place and the street where these weapons were. And when you get that level of intelligence, which you didn't have at the time, but we were getting that, you have to believe what they say.
Do you see
but
now...
afterwards, you find the Americans knew what we didn't know.
Do you see now a direct link between what happened then and the rise of Islamist fundamentalism and ISIS?
I think it's complicated, but right across the Middle East, you're right, Susanna. Iraq falling apart, which of course it has done. Syria with the civil war. Remember, we bombed, well, the Israelis bombed Syria and stopped them having nuclear weapons when I was Prime Minister in 2007. People forget that, and it's quite relevant to North Korea. We stopped them having nuclear weapons, so thank God Syria doesn't have nuclear weapons. But you've got these religious tensions, but most of all, you've got millions of young people on the streets in these countries without jobs, without education.
And do you think, in your heart, how do you feel about that, knowing that you voted for the action that has triggered
Well,
that
I've
trickle-down
said in the
effect?
book very honestly that I've had to review these events, and I'm sorry for what happened, and I'm sorry that we were not able to protect our troops better. You know, I've always valued our service men and women and thought they've done a wonderful job, and we celebrated and commemorated that at the weekend. But if you make a wrong decision, well, you know, based on wrong information that we feel we should have had but weren't given, you've got to say sorry.
In the book, the other major decision that you had was the disintegration of the global financial markets. And I remember that all happening. You moved with unbelievable speed, actually. And you really, I think, in many ways, saved this country from a far worse financial fate. You don't get the credit for that I think you deserve. Is that frustrating to you?
Well, maybe, but you know, I felt I knew what to do, and the Americans were changing presidents, so they were in turmoil. The rest of Europe didn't think that they were going to be hit by it. Actually, they were further hit later on with the Euro crisis. And I felt I knew what to do, but I had to get the whole world together. So I had to get the Chinese. They thought it was an American problem. They had to come on board. The Brazilians, Latin America, Africa. So I went around the world and tried to pull them all together. And we had this massive meeting in London. We had this $1 trillion stimulus to the world economy, and it brought the world economy back. Undoubtedly, it brought the world economy back. And people who were worried about their savings, their homes, and their jobs were actually better off as a result of what we did.
You lost at an election.
I lost the election. And you know, the big issue at that meeting in the G20 when we had it in London is the issue of today. Where the greatest division was amongst world leaders was on tax havens. And Sarkozy threatened to walk out. He was the French president. The Chinese said they wouldn't have it in their communique, that we would deal with tax havens. And now we've got this huge issue today, the Panama Papers, the Paradise Paper. You know, a third of world leaders are
Do you wish you'd done more on tax havens
we
when
did.
you were in a position to do it?
We did more, and then it sort of faded away. We blacklisted all these tax havens. We demanded action that they come into line. We were going to penalise them with sanctions. They would have been fined and excluded from the interim. But then it dissipated after 2010.
You launched a petition, Gordon, a few days ago.
And we got 1 million signatures.
You've had over 1 million signatures. It's resonated with people.
It's
incredible. Can I ask you something?
I tell you why. Because the tax haven money should be being paid on the health service. It should be going to the universal credit. It should be going to help the Grenfell Tower and other towers like it. And this is 500 billion of British money that's lying outside our frontiers. If properly taxed, then other people wouldn't have to pay as high taxes
I read your
themselves.
book, Gordon, and I've known you a long time. You know, I consider you.
I don't know how you've got the time to read books. Because you're always on television.
There's always time, Gordon. But I've known you a long time. I like you very much. I consider you a good friend. The book and then the interview we've just had. My frustration, I never met a more formidable brain in politics in this country. And I'm not saying that to falsely flattery. Many people think that. I think you got a bad rap when you were Prime Minister, never got the chance to show us really what you could do. You're still a young guy.
Yeah,
I'm
younger than Mr. Trump.
Right. You're way younger than Trump. Is it madness to think that you could not come back in a meaningful way into British politics?
You know, there's a shelf life for politicians, and most of us don't realise there is one. The public get fed up with you after a few years. One of my problems was I'd been Chancellor for 10 years. People knew me. The press is very intrusive. It's 24 hours. They know all about you. And people just get fed up.
Here's the thing with you.
Even Obama, after 6 years, people were saying, time for a change.
But I don't think they did really know you. And when you read the book, you do get a glimpse more of the real Gordon Brown, which I knew well. But my frustration with you as a leader was I never saw enough of it in public. There was a contradiction between the public and private man.
It's a criticism of Theresa May as well. And a final comment on that, you know, you've had troubles as a Prime Minister. How...
At least I know who my cabinet was. It changes every second day.
What message would you like to send the Prime Minister?
Well, I mean, look, it's difficult times. There's all these issues, but she's got to rebuild people's confidence in our country. I mean, people feel low, not just because of Brexit and the arguments about that, because of all these other issues we've talked about, the health service and so on. She's got to make an effort to rebuild people's confidence in Britain, because we are a great country and we should be doing better.
You understand politics, you think you understand political parties. You're all full of crap. You don't know what the Illuminati is. If you're Republican or you're Democrat, you're wrong! Why? It's this easy. It's called divide and conquer. That's why there's two parties and only two. And they're controlled by the same people at the very top who belong to the Council on Foreign Relations, the Bilderberger Group, they also belong to the Trilateral Commission, and you people don't even know what the hell that is. But if you did know, you would know that these are the people that control your world by making global policies that you never vote on, and by which parties both serve and belong to these organizations and control your world.
All float down here. And you will too. They all flow. They all flow.
Now, here's how it works. Really easy. Divide and conquer can only work if the people that are divided are not aware of the falsely created division. If you're not aware of it, then it works. If you know about it, then it don't work no more. If you have socialism without capitalism, it becomes communism. If you have capitalism without socialism, it becomes fascism. And it's just that easy.
I love you.
That's all you need to know. That's why Masonic symbols are all over your freaking money. But you don't pay attention